Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kirkner. We are broadcasting live on YouTube today from Chicago, Illinois, McCormick Place to be exact, at Rockwell Automation Fair. We are in the Digital Workforce Pavilion. All kinds of activity happening here today as people talk about partnering for the future of the workforce, partnering for the future of Industry 4.0, advanced manufacturing. We have a ton of phenomenal guests for you all day today and tomorrow as well. I won't be here tomorrow. We will have our producer and guest host, Melissa Martin, sitting in tomorrow to talk to even more really interesting people. In just a moment, I am going to introduce our guest for today. But as a reminder, we are here at Rockwell Automation Fair, and we are showcasing the power and value of connecting your enterprise end-to-end. When we talk about connecting your enterprise end-to-end, we have a perfect subject matter expert on that topic with us today. He comes to us in the form of John Dyck. He is the CEO of CESMII. We're going to talk all about what CESMII is here in just a moment. But John, thank you so much for taking some time for us this morning.
I'm truly honored to be here. It's a great place to be, a great time to be here, and love the conversation we're about to have.
And just incredible energy here, right? I mean, you just look around. I mean, the people are so fascinated by all these advancing technologies. I come to Rockwell Automation Fair every single year, and every single year I learn not just something new, but a ton of new things. So let's talk a little bit about some of the great things that CESMII is doing in the spaces that we're learning about today. One of the Manufacturing USA Institutes, so a lot of our listeners will recall that we were live from the International Manufacturing Technology Show about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, and interviewed a ton of people, including individuals that were involved with the institute. So I think our listeners are fairly familiar with what the institutes are, but just as a little refresher, tell us about the institutes in general, and then specific to CESMII, what is your unique mission and the technology focus for your organization, John?
Yeah, so Manufacturing USA heads up what at this point is 16 institutes focused on manufacturing broadly, and each one of us has a unique focus area. And our goal collectively is to use federal funds to inspire innovation and to drive and advance the cause of manufacturing in the U.S., create a more competitive manufacturing environment here. And so CESMII's specific lens, and CESMII stands for the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Institute, which is a mouthful. And so we talk about ourselves as the Smart Manufacturing Institute.
Okay.
We're focused on reducing the cost and complexity for how information can turn into value for manufacturers. So the entire value chain, from the source of the data all the way up to the operator, the plant, the enterprise, and the supply chain, and trying to reduce complexity. We talk about democratization of smart manufacturing, reduce cost and complexity, drive accessibility for all manufacturers.
And we're going to get into that democratization in a little while. I love that word, especially if you think about the world that we're living in and bringing amazing careers, amazing technologies to as many people as possible. One of the things that I was impressed with, John, as you and I were warming up for the show today, was just the incredible background and history that you have in the world of advanced manufacturing, including, by the way, working for a period of time at our host today, Rockwell Automation. So tell us a little bit about your career, where you've been, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I had the privilege of working for Rockwell Automation right out of college in the automation and information space, and learned a ton, which equipped me to join a friend in the sort of Rockwell Automation ecosystem at the time, in the 2000 timeframe, to raise some venture capital and build a software startup in this space, one of the first, not the first, manufacturing intelligence platforms called ActivePlant. That was acquired. I was able to go to GE and run their manufacturing portfolio. At the time was GE Fanuc, became Intelligent Platforms, and then GE Digital, and then had the opportunity to come back to Rockwell and work with the business development organization to help drive strategy, acquisitions, even the organic growth within the software business. And that led to a great opportunity 4 years ago to take what I've learned across all of these great organizations and lead the Smart Manufacturing Institute.
Just a fantastic career and a tremendous amount of background, and that background and all the exposure to these different technologies I know really fuels your interest in the work that you do at CESMII, certainly educates that interest and makes you, I think, probably the perfect person in this day and age to be running an organization like CESMII. It occurs to me as we're talking here, John, what a small world the world of manufacturing is. You know, you see in so many cases the same names are coming up over and over and over again. You mentioned GE Fanuc. Fanuc America Corporation's Chief Executive Officer was our guest on the podcast. We released that episode, I think it was just last week. Mike Chico was on with us last week. Paul Aiello from Fanuc was in Milwaukee with me last week doing a doing a conference. As our listeners know, I spent 10 years running a spin-off of Rockwell Automation back in the kind of early zeros period of time, so I've got a long relationship with Rockwell, as do you. And that relationship, I think, that you have with Rockwell Automation is really fueling some interesting partnerships. I was sitting at a charity event, I think it was now about 5 or 6 years ago, and there was this guy sitting next to me, and we started chatting, got to know him a little bit. He's become a pretty good friend of mine. We chat quite often on things, all things Rockwell, all things advanced manufacturing. That gentleman's name is going to be familiar to you. So I was sitting right next to a gentleman by the name of Tom O'Reilly, who is now Rockwell's Vice President of Sustainability. And I understand that Tom joined your board of directors, so congratulations, first of all. That's a pretty big get. He's a pretty big name. He used to be Global Vice President, I think, of Business Development for Rockwell, now doing some things on the sustainability front. So congratulations on getting Tom as in service to your board. And also just tell us a little bit about that relationship and the commitment to partnering with CESMII on sustainability efforts that Rockwell has to your organization.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. Having Tom join our board is absolutely exciting and a privilege for us. We're honored to have him join our board as a leader, as a thought leader, but also as a domain expert around sustainability. Right? That's such a vital part of what we do here. And I'll reference a survey that CESMII did several months ago with our partner SME, the Society of Manufacturing Engineers,
Sure.
where we learned that even this year, mid-2022, sustainability and energy productivity ranks pretty low in terms of manufacturers' interests, but virtually everything that ranks high in terms of the strategic areas of interest for manufacturing and smart manufacturing can feed directly the sustainability initiatives and the environmental, social, and governance initiatives that these manufacturers have. And so it's become really clear that the work that Rockwell Automation does, that CESMII is focused on broadly, of creating more competitive plant floors across this country, has a direct tie to sustainability. We just have to do a much better job educating and equating those wins, those productivity gains, that scrap reduction, that efficiency, to those sustainability initiatives. And everybody here on the show floor is doing that every day. We just don't count it.
Right.
And we've got to do a much better job helping connect those strategic initiatives with ESG, sustainability, climate control, all of these really important societal initiatives.
Absolutely. One of the themes we come back to here on the Tech Ed podcast often, John, is that these things are ands, not ors, right? We don't have to choose between productivity on the shop floor, between cost reductions and sustainability and being good environmental stewards. We can do both of those. And if we do them right, we can both reduce cost, we can improve productivity, and we can simultaneously do what's right for the environment. I think you make a really, really interesting point there. I just think back to my days of running manufacturing plants, and I was not a technical guy to begin with. I tell people I'm not an engineer. I just play one on a podcast maybe sometimes. But did not grow up on the engineering side, but you can't help but working in manufacturing, becoming really, really familiar if you're going to be good at it with manufacturing technology. I remember somebody coming to one of our plants years ago, selling us an air compressor, and the first biz dev person talked all about the features and benefits of this air compressor, and the second guy came in and he said, let's look at the air compressor, but let's also go out on your shop floor and let's look at how many right angles are in your fluid power connectors and how efficiently you're using compressed air and those kind of things. It turned out we could both buy a compressor that was more environmentally friendly, consumed less energy, reduced costs, and at the same time improving process on the shop floor, reduce cost again. It was an and, not an or, and it sounds like you're looking at it exactly the same way. I read the Wall Street Journal every single morning. You're right, there's a huge ESG focus across the board. We've got now private equity groups that are specifically focused on companies that are doing right by the environment, doing right by governments, and doing right by government regulation, and also doing right by sustainability, and at the same time pushing productivity, pushing profitability in the organization. So that's an interesting thing to look at as our manufacturers really all over the globe try and find more and more ways to reduce costs and also reduce their input and on the environment and reduce their footprint in terms of how they're affecting the environment. So great things going on from that standpoint. All of these things that we're talking about, whether they're improving productivity of a fluid power circuit on the shop floor, whether it's buying a new air compressor, whether it's figuring out how we how we employ Industry 4.0 technology and data analytics and predictive maintenance and all these other technologies that I know you're really into as well. Looking to the future of manufacturing, the big challenge, I think, with a lot of this is how do we find that global workforce that can actually drive these changes? And one of the things that we hear from manufacturers, probably more than anything, is, this technology is great, but where do we go to find these people that can actually drive that technology forward? I know your partnership with Rockwell Automation is a huge part of that. So tell us a little bit about how that partnership with Rockwell feeds specifically into the workforce development side of things.
Yeah, and going back to data, because that's kind of at the root of everything we do.
For sure.
This survey I referenced, in terms of the response to the question about what are the number one, 2, and 3 constraints that you face in implementing advanced manufacturing, smart manufacturing initiatives, the number one response was workforce.
Wow.
What I love about what Rockwell is doing now, and has been for a number of years now, is really augmenting that with education and training and workforce development. And that's so refreshing from my perspective, because as a technology provider, you sort of pay lip service. When someone says it's really not about the technology, it's about the people and the process, you sort of nod your head and then you keep selling technology.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But Rockwell Automation is selling technology, providing solutions, enterprise connectivity, but it's also in the business of creating a more effective, more educated, more available workforce. And that to me is so important. And that's, CESMII is about the democratization of smart manufacturing. We talk about that in the context of technology, education, workforce development, and ecosystem. So all three of those, we believe, as I know Rockwell believes, are vital to advance the cause of manufacturing here in the US. We have to create a more competitive manufacturing environment, and partnering with Rockwell from our standpoint is all about integrating ecosystem with workforce, with technology, and that's where we've got to focus.
Ecosystem, workforce, and technology. When we think about Rockwell Automation, and I think about my days, working with the spinoff that I ran all those years. When people would ask, what does Rockwell do? And the answer was, programmable logic controllers and variable frequency drives. And absolutely that, those types of technologies are core and key to their strategy. But in so many ways, they're almost becoming more like a software company, certainly becoming more like a technology company. Credit to the leadership of that great organization in pivoting that strategy over years, but still staying core to those principles that have been around for now well over 100 years. I'm a native of Milwaukee, so I've been watching the Rockwell story for my entire life, and of course that was a story that was well written. So, but before I was ever around, so a great story in the form of Rockwell Automation, a great partnership that you have with Rockwell. You also have this partnership you mentioned earlier with CESMII, and I understand that partnership has resulted in the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council. So tell us a little bit about this new council. What is the vision for the council, and who are some of the individuals and organizations that you've recruited to be a part of this?
So just by way of context, when we talk about ecosystem, the intent is to find the thought leaders, the organizations, and the individuals that understand that the path to the future looks a little different than what we've done in the past. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, manufacturers, as you know better than most, don't really do revolution. We evolve.
Right.
We don't like being at the bleeding edge of things. And so the path from our legacy to where we need to go isn't always an easy path. And so the Executive Council, which is roughly 21 manufacturing leaders that all represent a combination of both business and technology, core competencies, as well as OT and IT experience, are here to advocate for these ideas of smart manufacturing, for the value of smart manufacturing, for this new focus around ecosystem, education, and technology, to encourage and inspire this entire ecosystem, the integrators, the consultants, the educators, academia, the machine builders, systems integrators, and of course the broader manufacturing organizations, to invest in these areas and to expect the best from their partners in this space. And so some of the great organizations that we've are proud to sort of call partners in this Executive Council include Procter & Gamble, ExxonMobil, Corning, General Mills, Ford, GM, Stellantis, Toyota, Johnson & Johnson. Some of the great manufacturers across this country
Without
who
question.
understand that manufacturing competitiveness is key, and that the role of advanced manufacturing, smart manufacturing, is a vital one in this journey.
Absolutely. Well, you've certainly recruited some really, really significant companies, large companies, recognizable companies. What I love about that is it just brings in immediate credibility to the kind of work you do. You bring up a company like Stellantis, obviously well known to folks here in the Midwest. We're not too far from Detroit, I guess maybe 3 or 4 hours here this morning. But recruiting those types of organizations into an effort like the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council really brings tremendous amounts of credibility to the great work that you're doing as you move on democratizing manufacturing. And like I said in the introduction, I love that way of thinking about how do we take manufacturing, advanced manufacturing technology, make it available to as many different individuals, companies as possible. You're right, companies don't typically like to be manufacturing. Companies don't typically like to be out there on the cutting edge of manufacturing, especially small to mid-sized manufacturers, because there's risk, right? I mean, you take on or you make a bet on a new technology and that ends up, for whatever reason, not generating ROI or return on investment, or not producing the results that you hope that it would. Obviously, you're the guy standing there with the initiative that didn't work. So there is tremendous amount of risk in being out there on the cutting edge. And I think the work that you're doing to let people know we're going to pull the veil off of these technologies, we're going to make them implementable, we're going to make them work in your organizations. Really, really important work as you democratize smart manufacturing, which includes transforming the entire manufacturing ecosystem and supply chain. Like, that isn't quite an effort or quite an initiative that you're working on. So, I'd be interested in this, John. We have large companies like the ones you mentioned. We have small to mid-sized manufacturers that sometimes I think get lost in the whole ecosystem of manufacturing. We think of the big companies when we think of manufacturing. A lot of folks don't know that a tremendous amount, in fact, the majority of manufacturing here in the United States and around the globe is done by small to mid-sized businesses. So as we're thinking about these technologies, how should both large companies like those that we talked about and small to mid-sized manufacturers adopt smart manufacturing at a rate that helps the entire ecosystem to evolve and remain competitive?
Well, the fact that you're asking this question to me is really quite encouraging, because broadly speaking, this sort of digital transformation ecosystem is focused on the Fortune 1000, maybe the Fortune 2000. But we did the math and we figured out that 98.6% of the manufacturing ecosystem in the U.S. is small, mid-sized manufacturing.
Say that number again,
98.6.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And so the ecosystem broadly is focused on the large manufacturers for understandable reasons. When you sell to a Procter & Gamble, you can, in theory, deploy hardware, automation, software solutions across a large fleet of organizations and plants, and then perhaps even their suppliers. But the small mom and pop shop, the small mid-sized manufacturers, really find it challenging to engage. And in fact, the entire business models and the go-to-market models of this ecosystem struggle to engage small mid-sized manufacturing at the core. And so from our perspective, we're using this executive council, which is mostly Fortune 500 manufacturers, to kind of shed light on the fact that the entire ecosystem needs to transform. Because it's these small, mid-sized manufacturers that resemble, or in fact that make up the supply chains of these large organizations. And if we don't drive the same competitiveness and productivity initiatives into the small, mid-sized community, we won't be an effective manufacturing ecosystem in the US, period. In fact, here's an interesting data point. I downloaded some data from the Federal Reserve a while ago, and I saw that for the first time in our history, manufacturing productivity by worker has declined in the US in the last decade, which is disconcerting. And I think it speaks to the sort of plateauing effect of automation, of continuous improvement and lean initiatives in this country, and the idea of digitizing and re-accelerating, re-equipping, re-enabling those initiatives with new data, better data, real-time data is a vital part of how we create productivity across this country. And if we don't go there as a broad manufacturing ecosystem, we may have another decade or two of struggles here in the US. So I'm passionate about this. This is a really important area for all of us.
The stakes are high, and you know what this is reminiscent to me of something I'd be interested in your take on this. But when we're talking about, and I didn't realize the number was that high, 98.6% of the manufacturing ecosystem being small to mid-sized manufacturers. I've lived through a couple of transformations in my manufacturing career. The first one that I can remember was the transition to standardized quality, right? And you either understood it or you didn't, and there were a lot of large companies that, by requiring their supply chains to be, at that time, whether it was ISO or QS or TS or whichever standard that they were aligning their quality system to, require them to adopt standardized quality practices in their manufacturing operations, and it really improved the performance of manufacturers. Some people didn't do it, and most of those folks probably aren't around anymore, but the ones that did really improved the performance of their manufacturing operation. The second one was the whole transformation around lean, Kaizen, continuous improvement. That was probably, maybe hit its peak in the U.S. a dozen years ago or so, where all of a sudden we're talking about things like employee engagement, and we're talking about understanding how waste manifests itself in a process and across the supply chain, and then bringing lean tools to bear on improving performance and driving waste out of it, and driving waste out of process. And so much of that, there again, was driven by the Procter & Gamble's, driven by the Rockwell Automations, who went to their manufacturers, their Tier 1, Tier 2 suppliers, and said, we must figure out a way to have you implement these same programs, invested in training their suppliers on lean and smart lean and advanced manufacturing back then, Industry 3.0 technology back then. And now here we are, many would argue, well into the fourth industrial revolution. And it feels to me like you're kind of saying the same thing. Like, with all of these manufacturers in the manufacturing ecosystem being small to mid-sized businesses, they're going to be pushed by their customers toward Industry 4.0. Am I hearing that right?
Spot on. I think that's exactly right. They're going to struggle to get there on their own. They know they need to get there. And that's one of the things that CESMII is really focused on, using these large market-making manufacturing organizations and thought leaders like Rockwell, industry leaders like Rockwell, to create the right strategies and approaches, the roadmap, the tools, but then to turn that and ensure that we do that in a way that the small, mid-sized manufacturers can digest, ensure that they can trust who we are. We're a mission-driven, not-for-profit. We're vendor agnostic. We love our partners like Rockwell Automation and SME. We can represent that beacon of truth and agnostic sort of insights, capabilities, kind of a trusted beacon of truth for this ecosystem, for that community, and ensure that we truly do democratize this digital transformation, this smart manufacturing system.
I love that word, or that phrase, trusted beacon of truth. I mean, it really does give you that comfort as a small to mid-sized business that there are people who understand the challenges that come along with a huge transformation in a small company, and knowing that they've got organizations like CESMII firmly behind those efforts, really, really important. If I am one of those small to mid-sized businesses, John, and I'm like just overwhelmed, I'm here at a place like Automation Fair, every time I turn a corner there's another smart sensor, smart device, data analytics platform, digital twin. I mean, all this technology, it's just mind-boggling. Where do I start? What advice do you have for those small to mid-sized manufacturers that are just trying to figure out how to get going?
Well, I guess the first, and not to sound trite, but the first truism, and this is truly a journey. Everybody's in a different spot on that journey, and sort of recognizing that, and then engaging with organizations like CESMII, like Rockwell Automation, that can work together to put the right tools, the right assessment systems. We've invested a ton of money in creating a smart manufacturing business assessment that works for all manufacturers, but we've been very careful to ensure that small, mid-sized manufacturers, that it's optimized for small, medium manufacturers. And so understanding where you are on that journey, an objective sense of here's in multiple dimensions, here's my as-is state, right? And then building a roadmap to the future in a way that they can actually sustain and support low cost, low complexity, right? From our perspective, engaging requires a focused attempt to do the work, do the research, but it doesn't have to cost $100,000 to get started. You can get started, you can learn, you can equip your people. It starts with people. That's the bottom line. And between Rockwell Automation and CESMII, SME, we've got a lot of great tools. We've got some educational capabilities here. We've got what we call a smart manufacturing learning system here. All of that is designed to equip, in partnership with other organizations and educators, equip the small and mid-sized manufacturer. We talk about the citizen OT/IT technologist as the center of the sort of bell curve for this education initiative. It's so key So cute.
You're nailing it. I was in a meeting with a number of K-12 educators earlier this week, and one of them had just come back from a meeting with a large manufacturing company and said they kept using this term OT-IT convergence. We were afraid to ask what that means. What is that? And of course, it's the convergence in the world of manufacturing, of operations technology, information technology. I like to joke that in my years of running American manufacturing companies, we had an IT or an information technology team. We had an operations technology team, which would be your supervisors, your vice presidents of operations, your people working on the quality side of the business, as an example. And those IT and OT people wanted nothing to do with each other, right? And you would get the IT folks get called out to the shop floor. They were scared to death of what they were looking at. The IT people the OT people would see them come out and be scared to death of what they were going to do to their process. And we really are in a day and age now where those two have converged, that we have to be competent in both. When we think about plants being air-gapped 10, 15 years ago, where everything stayed inside the plant, you didn't have to worry about your intellectual property working its way out. Now everything in a plant is connected to the internet. We need to make sure that our people working there understand how to keep that information secure, how to keep things connected, how to deploy smart sensors and technology. So you've made that point a couple times today that you're really seeing this convergence of operations and information technology. We're absolutely seeing exactly the same thing. I know as you talk and people hear both businesses large and small, John, about CESMII, if someone wants to get engaged, where do they find you and how do they get connected?
I appreciate that. So CESMII.org, CESMII.org is our website, and it's designed intentionally for folks to engage where they are, whether it's around workforce, whether it's around ecosystem, whether it's around technology. And so we're here as a mission-driven not-for-profit to help these organizations, and that's hopefully what you'll find at CESMII.org.
Absolutely, and being mission-driven, that's so important. Every business that I've been involved in now for at least the last 15 years, we always put the mission first, right? I mean, I lived through the days of the end of the quarter and how much did we ship and what was net income and what's EBITDA and how much is the company worth and what's the stock price doing, all those kind of things. And not to say that isn't important, but being able to put that mission front and center is exactly what you're doing.
Spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you're walking around here at Automation Fair, John, and I know the day is still young, so probably lots and lots of things to see. If for folks joining us on YouTube, we're just getting started with our day here at Automation Fair. Anything that either you've seen that you think is really, really cool outside of just being on the Tech Ed podcast, which is going to be the highlight of your week, by the way?
Absolutely.
Other than that, anything that you've seen or that you're looking forward to seeing while you're here?
Well, first of all, I think the energy here is unbelievable.
It is.
The line to get my badge this morning was probably 700-800 people.
I know.
It was shocking.
Right.
And it didn't take that long. Thankfully, there's a great process and a great team out there. But it's clear that after 3 years of sitting in their offices, folks are ready and eager and willing to get out and engage. And so just briefly walking across the floor this morning, I love the diversity of companies, diversity of partners. It's exciting to be here. And particularly for me as a Rockwell alumni, having worked for this great company, to be back in this position, engaging in this way, partnering this way. So I'm just really, truly honored to be here.
Yeah, you're going to see friends who feel like family
Yes.
all week while you're here. Absolutely. I had the same observation, and I've seen it before at Automation Fair, how quickly they process people through that line out in front of this
Shocking.
building.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you think about if you're a company that is focused all around process improvement, process optimization, you better have that figured out, right? So it's the first impression everybody has.
Yep.
Our first impressions of CESMII, and I've actually been familiar with your organization for some time now, really, really positive, excited about your mission, excited about all the initiatives you have going on, John, and really appreciate you taking some time for us on the Tech Ed podcast here at Automation Fair.
Thanks for